Trans-Canada Rail Trip aboard Via Rail Train Number 1, the Canadian, crossing Canada 2,766 rail miles from Toronto to Vancouver between the 3rd and the 5th of June 2002. A slide presentation. Photos and narration by Tom Hildreth. The Royal York Hotel early on the morning of Tuesday the 4th of June 2002. I am treated to a spacious grand lobby with spiral staircase, balconies, and chandeliers. It's all still there, with a central timepiece that stands in quiet dignity for the traveler's benefit. The lobby of the Royal York Hotel in Toronto harkens back to an earlier era of railroad prosperity. Just across the street from the Royal York, more contemporary architecture gleams in the pre-dawn light. This is the Toronto Union Station lobby. Early on the day of departure, regional GO Transit commuter trains have arrived at Toronto Union Station from the east at the start of rush hour. The Royal York Hotel, built by Canadian Pacific Hotels in 1929, was the largest of that railroad's hotels. Now run by Fairmont, it is the older building in the right rear of this photo. As seen from the skywalk on the west side of Union Station, Via Train Number 1, the Canadian, extends out from the train shed a few minutes after sunrise. The CN Tower rises to the west of Union Station, well above the tracks. The rounded end of this car identifies it as an observation car. The rearmost piece of rolling stock on the train, it had the distinction in 2002 of being the very last of its type on a regularly scheduled passenger train in North America. This is an interior view of the observation car a few minutes after the Canadian's 9 a.m. departure time from Toronto Union Station. Through one of the windows we can see the CN Tower, now a mile or so behind us. It's back to the 50s, and I enjoy a casual continental-style breakfast in the observation car. Via Rail provides some history for its car names. In this case, car 8315, the Carlton Manor. I was told this car was built in the mid-1950s for the Canadian Pacific Railway. Proceeding west through the city of Toronto, GO Transit was busy shuttling commuters to work in bi-level cars. Around the curve and northward into the woods, looking forward to the locomotives from the fourth dome, I can see the Canadian is a long train. Here we see Ontario wetlands. Apparently unimpressed by our presence, the ducks paddle away slowly as the train passes by. About 300 miles out of Toronto, we stop for servicing at Capriol, Ontario. Most of our 278 miles of travel to this point had been through wooded areas. I had enough time at this stop to stretch my legs and grab a shot of the locomotives up front. The lead locomotive is an F40 type built by GMD at London, Ontario in July 1987. This was a typical scene as the train rolled through Ontario. At Capriol, some canoes were loaded into the baggage car. About an hour later, at Rouen, Ontario, well north of the Georgian Bay, we stopped briefly to disembark the men and their gear at what appeared to be a dark, swift river. Day 2. I awoke somewhere between Mud River and the CN Railroad town of Armstrong, Ontario, after we had traveled all night in an 800-mile arc around Lake Huron and Lake Superior. The 300-mile stretch to the Manitoba border was a land of large lakes and rivers. The train flashed through tunnels and wound its way through miles of rocky ledges, all part of a geological formation known as the Canadian Shield. Then, as if on cue, the land flattened, and without question, we were in Manitoba, a prairie province. This is the sunrise on Day 2 from the observation car. We were gliding by many large lakes, and I found it difficult to estimate the train's speed on the welded rail. I'm guessing 50 to 60 miles per hour was the norm. Heading through some ledges on single track at this point. The train is going up grade here with a 55 speed limit, probably expressed in kilometers. Approaching another of the many tunnels the train traveled through. And this is the light at the other end of the tunnel. Look quickly, there's a beaver hut on the right. Now we're on smooth double track as the Canadian rolls west towards Edmonton, Alberta. You can see the stone ballast is heavy here, covering the concrete cross ties almost completely. There was a lot of freight train traffic. The majority of it appeared to be double-stacked container jobs. Here, a crewman on an eastbound stacker inspects our train as we roll past. The dome car advantage, namely a great view of the countryside through which the train passed. Departing Winnipeg, we found we had a new passenger crew. The circus must have been in town because unfortunately our attendant for the next stretch of the trip was a real bozo. It's around 6 p.m. as we glide west out of Winnipeg. Prairie scenes like this marked our progress. Day 3. After we departed Winnipeg late in the afternoon of the previous day, we rolled 750 miles overnight through the prairie province of Saskatchewan. The next stop was Edmonton, Alberta. The Edmonton station stop is way out of town, and urban development has severed the rail connection with the railroad's Hotel Macdonald, where I was staying. A cab ride was necessary to reach the hotel. Overwhelmed today by newer multi-story commercial development, it's easy to see that the Hotel Macdonald at one time had a prominent hilltop location overlooking the North Saskatchewan River. The lobby entrance and grounds of the Hotel Macdonald on the river side of the building. Magpies flew about the garden in abundance. The Grand Trunk Railway built the Macdonald in 1915. What I was hoping for by staying in railroad hotels were scenes like this. My imagination provided images of men in top hats and women with umbrellas. The hotel garden overlooked the river, though to my eyes the river seemed diminutive. Old Strathcona was recommended as a local tourist destination. We found it to be disappointing. The shops we found were not laid out contiguously. They were dispersed among auto sales and servicing establishments, which made for an unpleasant walking experience. Apparently, the tourist business had not attained critical mass, and it just didn't work for pedestrians. The only photo I took in this area was of this A&W restaurant, the likes of which I had never seen before. Day 4. The day dawned bright and sunny. After getting several suggestions for breakfast spots, we headed for downtown Edmonton. It was 8 a.m. on a Friday morning, but none of these places were open. A mall food breakfast in a place called City Center would have to suffice. We visited Old Fort Edmonton Park, a living history museum that replicates the area's historic past. After the concrete and glass of Edmonton, I was happy with this representation of a frontier settlement. Included were historic buildings moved from their original locations downtown. Day camps are a popular function at the park. Here we see some replica supplies for early settlers. A York boat replica. In the spring, these boats would carry bales of pelts through the inland waterways to Hudson Bay. There, the pelts would be loaded aboard ships that sailed back to England. This is a scene along the 1885 street, a section of the park. And this is the 1905 street, complete with automobile, though I think it's from the 1920s, and a trolley track. Plenty of change had occurred in 20 years. Here we see home goods from the 1905 period in a store. Streetcar number 42 was built in 1912, according to the Edmonton Radial Railway Society. Day 5. After departing Edmonton, the train traveled 230 miles west and ascended the rails into the Rockies. Next stop was the alpine resort town of Jasper, near the border with British Columbia. With a population of 3,700, Jasper was an important train servicing facility on the Canadian National Railroad. While the train was being serviced at Jasper, I was able to walk around for a quick look at the shops and restaurants. This is the Alpine-style Canadian National offices at Jasper, as seen through a baggage car. The Canadians' Dome cars were washed clean at Jasper. For denizens of the Dome, like myself, this was truly important. Passenger engines shuttle about as our priority train is prepared to resume its westward journey. Ready for boarding, the Canadian will use most of the 6,000 horsepower available from these locomotives as we continue westbound up through the Rockies. Jasper fell behind the train as it rolled up through the mountains. Scenery like this brought the word awesome to my mind many times. Really big country slipped by with each mile of track. At some locations on the trip, the railroad itself commanded respect for its impressive bridges, tunnels, and other structures. Here, the mountains were steadily becoming the dominant presence. and this was a day to take in the mountains. No need to look through a car windshield at the road ahead. I could let go of that responsibility and simply gaze at the majesty that was gliding past. The peak of Mount Robson is hiding in the clouds in this photo. The summit is the highest in the Canadian Rockies at 12,972 feet. The train slowed nicely so we could take it all in. The train had begun its descent of the west slope when this impressive view of Pyramid Creek Falls slid by our window. Here, glacial-fed Pyramid Creek tumbles 300 feet into the North Thompson River. Descending towards Kamloops along the rolling Thompson River. The water has that look of light blue, a sign that its glacial sources are not very far upstream. And then there are the high wetlands, where I'm always looking for a moose, but never seeing one. Shortly after making a station stop at a small town, we took a red signal and stopped at a road crossing. What appeared to be a passenger who had missed the departure time climbed out of a car by the roadside and boarded the train. Now that's customer service. We were underway again very quickly. Day 6. The Rockies for breakfast. Dome time, the Fraser River glide, and arriving in Vancouver. Into the light of day 6, more rivers and mountains to go with breakfast. More spectacular scenery just outside the window. Allow me a quote from Stan Rogers' wonderful Northwest Passage LP to accompany this photo. And through the night behind the wheel, the mileage clicking west, I think upon Mackenzie, David Thompson, and the rest, who cracked the mountain ramparts and did show a path for me to race the roaring Fraser to the sea. Out of the mountains now, the valleys open to broad, rich bottomlands. This area produces an abundant crop of brewer's hops. We now see that tidal waters are alongside the tracks. Our train takes the lower bridge in this view, crossing the Fraser River into Vancouver, British Columbia. Vancouver by the Pacific Ocean, my goal on this trip. In the center right of this view you can see people walking and jogging on the seawall, a 13.7-mile paved pedestrian right-of-way. The end. Thanks for watching.